A drawing tutorial, that's what I have for you today, and I've got 10 beginners' mistakes. Not only that, but I'm going to put them in order of importance. So I have been doing YouTube for over a year now, and one of the things that has given me some success so far on this platform is the fact that I have 20 years of real-life painting tutorials to fall back on. I've been teaching painting to all ages in all sorts of places for many, many years, and this does give me an advantage because I know the mistakes that people make. And we all like to think we're unique, don't we? But I can assure you that I see the same mistakes and have seen over the years the same mistakes over and over again. So whilst I've taught thousands of students, I have not seen thousands of mistakes. I do see the same mistakes made again and again. And sometimes I get comments here on YouTube and people say, well, how did you know I do that? It's because everybody does that. And it's because we all share a common sort of physiology, and we all have the same type of human brain, and we all have the same relationship between the brain and what the eye sees. And this is a big thing. This is going to cause you problems because your brain is going to tell you lies. Now what happens is this: your eyes take in information, it travels to the brain and the brain interprets it. But the problem the brain has is that there's too much information. We are seeing, millions of things every single day. The brain does not have time to look in detail at everything. If you're walking past a house, the brain just tells you it's a house. The only thing the brain needs to do is decide if you need to go in the house or walk around the house. That's the end of houses as far as your brain is concerned. It does not need to know what shape the house is. It has its own idea of the shape of a house. And if you go to draw one on a piece of paper, it's likely to override what your eyes are seeing and take that shortcut because your brain knows what a house looks like, and it's going to tell your hands how to draw a house on the paper. So part of learning to draw is making your brain slow down, stopping it from taking shortcuts, and actually learning to analyze what you are seeing so that you can place it accurately on the paper. So you might be thinking, well, that's not my fault, and you're right, it's not your fault. But as someone who's been teaching drawing for many, many years, I can help you get ahead here because I know exactly what your brain is going to tell you to draw on the paper, because I've seen lots and lots of other human beings do the same thing. So in this tutorial, I'm going to go through the 10 most common mistakes that I see beginners make. And we're going to go from 10, we're going to count down to 1. And at number 1 is the biggest drawing mistake that I see. And with this mistake in particular, but in fact with all the mistakes, unless you've had some tuition, you are likely to be making these mistakes. They're really, really simple to understand. And once you've learned them, you'll be able to stop your brain sending the wrong information to your drawing hand. So I'm going to tell you about each of these mistakes, and then I'm going to point the camera downwards and give you some physical examples so that you can start to improve your drawing skills. And let's start with number 10. At number 10, we have pressing too hard. Now the reason I've put this at number 10 rather than at number 1, for example, is that not everybody does it, but a significant amount of people press too hard and grip the pencil too tightly, and this can cause numerous problems. So let me show you what I mean. So here's a fish. Obviously I'm not going to worry too much about being too accurate with them, but what happens often I see is that beginners will draw like this, sort of almost going round in an unbroken line and pressing, quite hard. What happens is, because you're putting so much pressure on the paper, you're likely to go very wrong. Also, because you press so hard, if this eye, for instance, is in the wrong place, it's going to be quite hard to remove. If you're going on to paint something like a watercolour from this drawing, you've got a double problem, and the problem is that on thicker watercolour paper, and I'm just on drawing paper today, but on thicker watercolour paper, it's going to be almost impossible to get rid of that mark, because what happens is that the watercolour paper dents, and then the bad impression, the one you didn't want, is left behind even if you rub out the graphite. So doing this not only means that your mistakes may stay with you or reappear during your painting, but also it's really, really hard to draw accurately when you press so hard and put so much pressure on. You want to hold your pencil really lightly. It's not a dog lead or a horse. You don't need to hang on to it. All you've got to do is stop it falling on the table. Now this pencil here is a 6H. Another thing you can do is to switch to a softer pencil. Now there's nothing wrong with using a hard pencil like this, but if you do use a hard pencil, it's really important that you use very, very light lines, and then you switch to a softer pencil when you come to the shading. But if you do find that you constantly press too hard and you constantly have trouble getting rid of your mistakes, you might want to try a softer pencil. Now the other thing that you may not be aware of is that Nobody draws correctly the first time, not even professional artists. I mean, I don't draw correctly the first time. No professional artist that I know ever draws 100% correctly. You're being too hard on yourself, expecting yourself to draw something perfectly the first time and to sort of commit to this one really heavy, really hard line. So let's look at how I would look at drawing this fish. So I'd be sort of thinking about, you know, a rough guideline for where its body shape was, and then just sort of start putting in, you know, a rough idea. And can you see that I'm using, it's too close to the other one, isn't it? It's going to overlap. I'm using little marks, and I'm not sort of committing to anything. I'm giving myself the opportunity of changing things later on if I don't like the way they're looking. And by holding my pencil less firmly, I can make these lovely soft sweeping marks. And can you see that I'm moving almost from the arm, not just the hand? In fact, the hand is barely moving at all. Most of the work is coming from my arm, from my shoulder. And you can see I'm just starting to get an idea of how things are. It's very, very light. If I don't like it, I can just take an eraser and rub it out. So don't press too hard, don't overcommit at the beginning. Use short strokes, draw from the shoulder, not from the fingers. Don't grip your pencil as if your life depended upon it. Allow yourself to make a light sketch that's easily adjustable, and if you find that you constantly press too hard, change to a softer pencil. This will give you blacker and softer marks on your paper that are easier to see and easier to lift out. And whether you use a hard or a soft pencil, don't press too hard until you know you've got things in the right place. Once I've decided I like this fish, of course, I can go round and strengthen my lines. But in the early stages, allow yourself a bit of leeway. Now, do you ever find that when you draw something, it looks like it's tipping up towards you? It might be something like the top of a box or even a mug, but equally it might be something out in a landscape like a path or a river. So mistake number 9 is drawing things that look like they're tipping up towards you. I've got a really, really simple way of fixing this. Let me show you how it's done. Do you ever draw something and find that the top of it looks like it's tipping up towards you? Now, this could be something like a mug or a cup. You know, it could be a still life object. It could even be something like a box like this one. Do you find you end up with that top area sticking up towards you? Perhaps it's something like a path. So let's draw a little baby landscape here. So I've got my horizon line. Let's have a sun in the sky. You can see that this is just a little bit of fun here. Okay, maybe we've got a few trees as well. Now, if we've got a river or pathway that goes into the distance here, do you find that it just looks like it's almost standing up? It's not laying flat in the landscape. Now, with landscapes, you always want to go back to the horizontal, but the same rule applies to fix this as applies to your still life objects. You're going to do two things. If something looks like it's sticking up towards you, you're going to reduce the depth and lessen the angle. So let's look at this mug here. We're going to reduce the depth. This is the depth. We're going to make it shorter. We're going to lessen those angles, and we can make the top of our cup flatten down. The same with the box. We're going to reduce the depth and lessen the angles. Now the top of our cube is laying flat. The same goes for the river here or the pathway. We need to go back to the horizontal, and we're going to lessen the depth and reduce those angles. And now our path or our river is laying flatter. It's not standing up towards us like some kind of ladder to the sky. We've got the same thing here with our cube and our mug of coffee. We reduce the depth and we lessen the angle. So anything that's standing up, you want to make it flatter. And if it has a depth to it, you want to reduce that. By adjusting the depth, by making those curves and those angles less steep, we allow things to lay flat. So mistake number 8 is when you're drawing something that goes behind something else and you draw it in two pieces rather than drawing it in one. It's easier for me to show you than to explain it properly, so let's point the camera downwards and have a look at how this one works. It's going to make all the difference for getting your drawings to hang together nicely and getting things to align properly. So I've got a new piece of paper for this because I want to show you how to really sort of sweep through things as you're drawing them. And in this video, do forgive me if there's a bit more of an angle on the paper than usual. Just had one or two problems with my tripod, which I will sort out before the next video. So what I see people do is if, for instance, they have a leaf like this, and then there's another leaf behind, what they'll try and do is they'll do something like this. So we start sketching this half of the leaf, and then we start sketching the other half of the leaf. And what happens is they don't quite line up. It may not be enough for people to immediately notice, but overall they're just going to feel that something isn't working quite correctly. So I'm going to show you a different way of doing it. And what we're going to do is we're just going to draw straight through and then erase the bit we don't need. So what you're going to do to put the leaf behind is just sweep through like this. And what happens then is you naturally get an image that really completely lines up. And you don't actually have to draw even that heavily if you're worried about getting too much pencil on the paper. So let's put a stem in as well. You can actually almost sort of take your pencil up and then just almost lightly skim over that bit like that, so that you're barely touching the paper. It's really easy then just to remove the part that you don't need. It's a great way of putting foliage behind other items if you've got a really complex picture. It's really important as well for things like horizon lines. So again, you know, sometimes we might have something in the foreground like this. You know, we might have a tree in the foreground, and then we want to put, that's a terrible tree, isn't it? Let's adjust that. Looks like something from a horror movie, doesn't it? Okay, I'm going to stop drawing the tree now. So again, what people do is they go along with the horizon line, and then you end up with something like this where one just doesn't line up with the other correctly. So again, what you want to do is just take that line straight through. It enables you to draw naturally and to not end up with things that are behind other objects being out of alignment. At this point, as always, if you're enjoying this video, could I ask you please to click that thumbs up, that like button. YouTube rewards channels with audience interaction. If you like, share, subscribe, or leave me a comment, YouTube will push this video out to more people. And I'm so grateful to all of you who watch my channel. Mistake number 7 relates to ellipses. Now, what's an ellipse? It's a circle that's seen on the side. So in other words, if you were drawing this jam jar and you were drawing the circle here and it wasn't face on like this, would you end up with an ellipse with corners? So often I see people drawing ellipses with corners, and if you look at this jar, it doesn't matter what angle I turn it at, there's no corners in it, are there? So I'm going to explain to you why your ellipses end up getting corners and how you can draw them in a much smoother way. Let me show you what I mean. So when we have a mug like this one, and we're trying to draw that top part, what people normally do is they try and draw it in sort of short bursts like this. Now, whilst I said that was a good way of drawing, this is too stilted, and what you're going to end up with is something like this, and you're going to end up with an ellipse that has corners. Now, if you look at any jam jar, any mug, any round vase, you're going to notice that there are absolutely no corners on it, so this is incorrect. What we're going to do instead, and although you can't see the whole of me at the moment, you can see how my hand moves. We're going to move from the shoulder rather than from the hand. We're not going to sort of try and force it round like this. We're going to take the pencil lightly, as we've already learned, and we're going to circle like this. And I am moving from the shoulder, my elbow's not moving, my hand is not moving, and look how much of a better result we get. Of course, that's a little bit scruffy. What we can do then, once we've decided where we want things, is we can go round and we can just strengthen the line of the part that we decide is the best part. Remember that however narrow an ellipse is, you know, if you could just barely see the top of the cup, it's like this. There are no corners on an ellipse. At number 6, and this one is so common, it's drawing things like mugs and vases, circular objects basically, on a tabletop with a flat base. It's easy to understand what's going on here. Your brain knows that the table is flat, so it wants to draw the bottom of the vase or the jar or the mug as completely straight. However, this is wrong. I'm going to show you a much better way of doing it, and I'm going to explain why actually the base of an object when seen sitting on a table should be a deeper ellipse, in other words more curved, than the top. It's hard to believe, isn't it? But I'm going to explain a very, very simple perspective rule to you. And before we do that, I want you to take an object like this with a curved top, and I want you to think about how you see this. So if you hold it and it's level with your eye line, it's almost like a straight line, isn't it? And then if you put it lower and lower and lower below your eye line and you look down at it, it becomes more curved. So with that in mind, let's look at the demonstration. So let's draw a vase, and what I see people do very often is they've got a nice curve on the top of their vase there, and here we come down the side of the vase or vessel. Looks more like a water jar than a vase, doesn't it? So we're coming around like this, and then what I see people do is this. As I said, the brain is telling you that it's on a flat surface, therefore the bottom must be flat. However, let's think back to the experiment. So when you held up that cylindrical object, whether it was a mug or a cup or a jam jar, you noticed that it was flatter when it got closer to your eye line, and the further down that you held it, the deeper the ellipse got, the more circular it became. And if you were looking at it from above, it'd become a complete circle, wouldn't it? So let me explain what happens. In this case, we will assume that you are looking down, because you're pretty much always looking down at a table. So here we are looking down at a table. Should be on the side really, shouldn't it? But never mind. Okay, so we're looking down at the top of the vase. So let's do another vase here. And let's do the sides again. And let's go round to do the base. Now, if we're looking down at the top, then the bottom's even lower below our eye line. As we took that cylindrical object down, it became more circular. This means that the base will be even more circular than the top. If you could see through, if it was a glass vase, you'd see something like this. This ellipse is deeper and more circular than this ellipse, because whilst we're looking down at this, we're looking further down at this. And you'll see straight away, if I just take that little bit out because it's distracting, you'll see straight away how much more realistic this looks than this. So at number 5, we have not taking advantage of repeating motifs, in other words, not getting the perspective correct on them. So what is a repeating motif? It's just the way actually that I have coined of describing items in your drawing or painting that get smaller into the distance. So these are items that are the same size in real life, but because of perspective get smaller as they go away from you. So an example would be grass stems, possibly flowers, maybe a row of trees that are all the same size, or something like fence posts. Could even be something as big as houses. Anything that if you were to stand in front of it is all the same size, but as it goes away from you into the distance appears to get smaller. So many people don't take advantage of this. It's a really, really simple perspective trick. You don't actually need to calculate anything. You've got a lot of leeway on this one, but it will make a big difference to how your paintings and drawings look. Let me show you how to get better results. So let's think about a meadow, grasslands perhaps. Again, let's put a little sun in the sky just so that we can indicate that this is a horizon line. We've learned how to do a nice river or path that lays flat in our landscape now, so let's put one of those in. So this is what I often see once it comes onto the detail stage, or perhaps even onto the painting stage. I see people doing little blades of grass perhaps, and the same here, and the same here. And can you see what's wrong with this? This grass is the same size 500 yards away as it is where it's just below our nose. So what you want to do whenever you have a repeating motif is to exaggerate the amount that it gets small into the distance. So for this one here, we might have these sort of mid-sized grasses here, but in the foreground here we might have some huge ones because they're right below our nose. As they go further back, they'll get smaller. By the time they're up here, they probably can't be seen at all, and we can just do that as areas of textured colour. So don't make the mistake of doing things that are right in front of you, the same size of things that are a distance away. If in reality they're all the same size, they must get smaller as they go into the distance. The same is true of fence posts. So let's have a little fence post here. The next one's going to be a bit smaller, and then further away, smaller too. Always take advantage of perspective to make repeating motifs smaller as they go into the distance. At number 4, and this is definitely one where the brain is playing tricks on you, is do you end up facing everything forward? Do you try and draw a face on the side and it ends up facing forward? Or a flower, do you try and draw a flower on the side and it ends up facing forward? Or even something like a house? This is your brain messing with you. This is the reason the Egyptians drew everything in flat perspective. We have learned a little bit since those times, so I'm going to show you some simple ways of seeing things that are facing in different directions. Now, drawing things facing forward is usually the case of the brain playing tricks on you. It's very hard to make your brain stop and look at things carefully and see how deep, how wide they actually are, the shape that they actually are, as opposed to the shape that your brain knows them to be. Now, although this can happen with things like houses and buildings, where I see it most is faces and flowers. We end up with all the faces and all the flowers facing towards us. So I've got a quick trick for flowers, and that's to find the center line, draw the outside shape, and then fill in. So from observation, when you're looking at your flower, find the center point, find the outside shape. What you can do then is you can just fill in, and you will automatically get your flower facing in the right direction. What about people? You want to find the center line for a person's face. So if all your faces end up facing forward, what you want to do is first of all look at the outside shape of the face. If it's on the side, it may be slightly uneven shaped like this. And then you want to look for the center line. Now the center line goes dead down the middle of the face, but it will have moved over when somebody has turned their head. So when you're copying your person, I want you to look for the center. Look for the bridge of the nose, look for the center of the lips, because they're always easy to spot. Now, although the center line goes through the face, remember that the nose sticks out beyond the oval shape of the face. So the center line, for example, will not go straight through the tip of the nose. It goes through the center of the face and the nose sticks out from there. So if this person is looking on the side, we find the center line and it's over here, then all of the features can be built around there. Notice that although this is the center line, the features are not even. You will see a lot more of them on this side than on this side, and that's because of foreshortening. So if we have eyes here, we can put some hair on or whatever we're drawing. Now this is just a cartoon person, but you can see that by following that line through the center of the face, and if her face was turned further round, the nose might protrude further than that center line. But by finding this center line, remember, look for the bridge of the nose, look for the center of the lips. Those are the easiest points to find. You can now draw a face or a flower that's facing to the side. Number 3 is definitely not your fault, because I see so many art tutors teaching this one wrong, and I will argue my corner all day long about this one, and that is placing eyes on a straight line of perspective. Straight line between the eyes. This goes for animals, this goes for people. The skull is curved. You cannot place the eyes on a straight line. It will not work. Now I do have, I'm going to link at the end of this video, I have a tutorial all about drawing faces that's going to explain more about using curved guidelines in a bit more depth. So do stay till the end if you want to watch that one. But for now, let me explain why you cannot place the eyes along a dead straight line, even if someone's looking straight at you. If you've done some portraits and you think, well, the eyes just don't look quite right, this may well be the reason. So let's look at this mistake of putting the eyes along a straight plane, a straight guideline. Now, it gives me no pleasure to say this, but I have seen YouTube channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers teach this wrong. I've seen graphics on Instagram, on Pinterest particularly, on Twitter. I've seen graphics go viral, again, get tens of thousands of views, and it is simply wrong. Now, most things that I tell you in art are just a matter of my opinion. Whether I tell you should use a soft pencil or a hard pencil, that's just my opinion. However, this is basic biology and it's science, and it cannot lie. Let's look at this person who is facing to the side. What would happen here is we would have a curved guideline like this. And it will be more curved as it intersects the center line and less curved towards the back. And that's because the skull is an oval shape, not a circle. And we would have something like this. And these guidelines are going down because the person is looking down. Even if somebody is facing towards you, you have to consider the shape of the skull. And even though you're looking at it straight on, the skull is curved. Looking at somebody straight on, the nose may be here, you would be dealing with something a little bit like this. But as I said, if the head tips down, these guidelines will go down, and if the head tips up, these guidelines will go up. This is just the same for animals. If you're drawing a dog, a cat, I say animals, I mean mammals. Obviously, if you're drawing a flatfish or something, you might be pushing it a little bit. But certainly for dogs, this is exactly the same thing. Do not try to put the eyes along a straight line. Now, once you draw these, you may think, well, there's very little difference. You know, they do line up horizontally, but that's not the point. If you don't get the shape of them following the shape of the skull, even though it may be quite subtle when someone's facing towards you, it's not going to look right. Now, to be clear, the guideline is about the shape of the head, not the shape of the features. So, for instance, our guideline here could go this way, but the person's mouth could tilt down at the ends. Maybe they're super grumpy, and you never want to put the eyes along a straight guideline because the skull is not flat. I'm going to link to a video at the end of this one which will explain this concept in much more detail and lots of other helpful tips for drawing faces as well. So we're getting close now to the most common mistake that people make when drawing, but this one comes in a close second, and it's drawing the top of things that you can't see. Now, I most often see this in the case of buildings. You probably know what a chimney looks like, you know what the top of a chimney looks like, but can you actually see that when you're standing on the ground? There's a simple trick to fix this. It's all about the corners. Let me show you how it's done. Now, I've had to turn my paper over. I was running out of space, but let's look at this idea of drawing the top of things that you can't see. Let's think first of all about a chimney. So what I see people do is they draw this, because this is the shape of a chimney. This is what their brain is telling them a chimney looks like. Here's the problem. If you're standing on the ground, you can only see the top of this chimney if you are above it. If you are a bird, you would only see the top of this chimney if you were standing on a very high viewpoint. In other words, you were standing above the building. If you were standing on the ground, the chimney would actually look like this. Now, what I want you to look at here is this front corner, this corner here. See how it's going down here and it's going up here. This is the important thing to remember. Now, it's exactly the same if I'm drawing something that's cylindrical. So maybe I've got a circular tower or a circular chimney or a lighthouse, something like this. Again, people will draw like this. But again, you can only see this if you are above, because that's the top, and you can only see the top if you're above it. So what this would look like from below is this. And again, you can see here we had a corner facing down or a corner facing up, and here we have a curve facing down or a curve facing up. So this is all a matter of observation, and if you find yourself drawing the top of something, ask yourself if you would actually be able to see that. Now, this goes for buildings as well. So let me draw a building like this. I say building, it's more of a small shack, really, isn't it? I think building might be flattering it somewhat. Okay, and then we've got the roof on. Now, when you're drawing a house, you want to ignore the roof and think about the actual structure of the square part. So if we were to do this, ignoring the roof, so let's get rid of that for a moment so it doesn't distract us. We have sort of a cube, don't we? But it's unfinished, isn't it? Because if we've got a cube like this, then we need to fill the top in, don't we? And lo and behold, we can see the top of the cube. We can see the top of the building. And look at these angles, facing down, facing down. Now, what actually happens if you are standing on the ground? And you absolutely could have this viewpoint if you were standing on a mountain looking down at the house. But what generally happens if we're on the ground, let's do a bit of a bigger house, shall we say, a sort of a two-storey house this time. What usually happens, certainly with a two-storey house, we'd be maybe a third of the way up. Our eye line would be a third of the way up. So we're looking up at the top, but we're looking down at the bottom. I do have other tutorials on YouTube about how to draw buildings, so do have a look at that. So think about your building logically. Think about this corner. Does it go up or down? Be careful with photographs because they can flatten these angles terribly. And if you're drawing something tall or something that's above your head and you're drawing it so you can see the top of it, understand that you would not be able to see that in real life. And what you're doing is you're drawing what your brain tells you is there, not what you can actually see. So here we are at number 1, and do remember to stay right till the end of the video because I've got some free downloadables for you, and I'm also going to link to that face drawing tutorial. But at number 1, the most common mistake that I have seen for years and years and years with children, with adults, with everybody, and that's starting to draw on your paper without planning the layout. Let me explain to you why it gets you in so much trouble, why it can lead to absolute heartbreak in your drawings, because even if you draw part of the drawing really, really beautifully, if it ends up sitting badly on the paper, it's not going to look any good. Let me show you a much better way of working. So I've drawn a couple of squares on the paper here, and we're going to assume that each of these is a sketch pad or a piece of paper. Let's go back to the idea of our fish. So let me think about drawing my fish. Now what most people do is they just randomly start. We'll go somewhere near the middle here, and we'll start drawing our fish. Okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to draw our fish here. It's looking okay, isn't it? Some people actually stop at this point and, you know, spend half an hour making the most beautiful fish eye, lovely little fish face. Smiley face, there we are, beautiful little fish face, and they'll spend ages, you know, getting all the scales in and making it look lovely, and then they'll go on to doing the rest of the drawing, and oh, look what's happened. All that time that we spent making that beautiful little smiley fish face has been pretty much a waste of time, because now we can't fit our fish on the paper. He's gone off the edge. He's not the right size, which means that all the other things are now in the wrong place too. It's going to be quite hard to rescue the composition on this and make it look okay. So let's look instead at what you should be doing. So here's our second piece of paper. I want to place my fish in the middle, so I'm going to make some marks. I think I will say that he's, I'll put him in the centre. Let's have him in the centre. So let's put a little centre guideline in so I know where he's going to sit. I don't want him to come too far over, so I'm going to put that. Let's make a little mark. So I'm not going to put his little smiley face further than this mark. And let's have a little mark for the towel. So I'm not going to allow the towel to come further than this here. Let's put a little guideline up sort of for the end of the towel. Okay, so now looking at it, well, I've not got that much space, have I? And the towel is, let's say the towel is a third of the body. So let's make a little mark there, which means that my fish is going to have to fit in this space here. And then we'll get his towel in here. So the first example is like getting on a train without buying a ticket or seeing where it's going. You have no idea what's going to happen or how big anything's going to be or whether everything's going to fit on your paper. The second example, you have taken control, you have placed a centre line for him to sit on, and you have made a mark for one side and the other side, and you have said to yourself, the whole fish must fit into this area. I'm not going to do any details on this fish whatsoever until I've placed it on the paper and I'm sure I'm happy with that overall composition. I'm not going to waste an hour of my life doing the most beautiful little fish face and finding that the placement is just wrong. And never just start randomly drawing in the middle of your paper. No professional artist would ever do this, but the difference is that we've learned to start measuring before we start drawing. So do let me know in the comments if you have been guilty of any or all of these drawing mistakes. Hopefully you've learnt something interesting today. Let me know if any of these was an absolute aha moment. Now I did mention that I have some free downloadable PDF guides for you. I have some watercolour painting guides and some other guides. You can grab those for no money whatsoever. Just click the little down arrow and go into the video description. You'll also find details of all my online courses and other trainings in there. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you're really going to enjoy my drawing faces video. It explains more about curved guidelines and gives some other really simple tips that are going to really maximise your portrait painting abilities. You can watch that video right now.